Welcome to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person.
Do you know that before every video that I do with my good friend Dan Norton, he asks me if I'm good? He's like, David, you good? I'm not good, Dan. I'm not good. I'm just me and I'm just doing it. But I appreciate the outreach for assistance, and I thank you for at least thinking of me in that way.
It's mostly are you good for us to start recording? Can I press the record button now, or do you have some rambling to do before we start?
No, it makes sense. It's good to be selfish like that, Dan, and really not care about the person your podcasting partner. Dan, I think a lot of our viewers want to know, or they don't, but I'm going to pretend like they do. When you choose a hair color slash style, where does that come from? Like, what's the motivating factor? Like, have you been thinking for 6 months, you know what? This is my green time of the year. You know, it's St. Patty's Day. And what's going on with the color slash style decisions in your life?
Well, the style was I'd always wanted to do the mohawk, and last time I did it, I did kind of a mohawk, but I left it a lot wider. And so it was more just about having less hair, because I have really, really thick hair, so I want less actually on my head, but I don't look good bald. And then the green was just when we got there, she said, "What color do you want to do?" And I said, "I don't know. Are there any colors you want to try out?" And she said, "I'll see what we've got," and came back with a few options, and one was neon green. So I said, "Yeah, let's go neon green."
So you actually, in sort of a way, you let her choose the color.
Yeah, I've done that before. I mean, once I was only intending to get it bleached and just keep it blonde, and then the guy said, "Oh, I've been really wanting to try out putting this color on someone." So I said, "All right, let's do that."
Man, it's fantastic, Dan. I think I'm going to have to come up with like a top 10 list of things you ought not to let other people tell you what to do, right? Give you the advice what to do. So we'll have to come with that. Craig, if you're watching, I know with that brain, it's already starting to percolate. So percolate. Okay, Dan. And Dan, have you decided in the 2 days since you've owned the new hairstyle if you like it in the mohawk, formerly slicked back, or you like this new, more free flowing version that you've displayed today?
I mean, I like both. I'll have it one way some days and the other way the others.
All right, Dan. That's fair. It's it's still a free country at the moment, so you ought to be able to try some of those things. Dan, I'd like to talk for a moment about food. I don't know why. I just want to, and that's what it is. So I'm going to show this on the screen. If you want to look for something when you're at Sam's Club and you're looking for Pokemon cards, but they don't have any, you find this in your local Sam's Club. Okay, these are called Hostess coffee cakes, cinnamon streusel. This is what they look like. They're just little things. This is one of the most tasty things you'll ever put in your body. Okay, I just want to show you. So if you like a good snack, you don't want to go and spend a ton of money for these things, like at a Crumble Cookies. You just need a quick tide me over. This is the one you want to get. Okay. I don't go shopping, folks, at all. I never go shopping because I have a driver, I have a housekeeper, I have a gatekeeper, I have people that take care of me, 100% of the time. But I don't go shopping because I don't have any patience, nor do I know what I'd be shopping for. So yesterday, so what I do is I think you guys will find this interesting because why wouldn't you? It's so stupid. There's nothing to find interesting about it. I take all my cereal crumbs from my favorite cereal, and it's a protein cereal, and I save them in a box, okay, in a nice, hermetically sealed box. And then I want to drink them with some milk, but I can't drink milk because my good friend Dan and I were both lactose intolerant. I'm convinced that every person in the country is lactose intolerant, whether or not they want to admit it or not. So yesterday, after looking for years of trying to come up with a milk that was low calorie, because it's got to be low calorie, but still actually contains protein, that's not milk, I decided to do a formal search for it, and I came across this, okay? So, by the way, I'm getting compensated for all the things I'm showing in here to our 100 viewers. I wish. I should call Fairlane. Could you guys help me out? Send me a couple of free gallons of milk. Anyways, so Dan, take a look at this. This is important for you, although I'm not sure neither of us can afford it. So this is a milk that's 0% fat. It's skim. It's basically 50% more protein than regular milk, and it's not milk. Well, how good can that be? So yesterday, for one of the first times in my entire life, I had a bowl of cereal where I didn't get sick afterwards for 2 hours and feel terrible in my stomach. But then the shocking part. This gallon of milk or whatever the heck this is, it's like, I asked my wife, how much was that thing? She goes, $6.49. How long has it been since I've been to the store, folks? $6.49? She told me the milk that she buys at Costco in 3 packs is like $4.50 a gallon or half gallon or whatever the heck this is. What is this? Dan, what is this? A half gallon or gallon? It's 52 fluid ounces. I don't know what the hell it is.
That looks like
So
a gallon.
okay, it's almost a gallon, I guess. I think a gallon's probably 64 or something. So
No idea.
so do any of you guys, when they talk about inflation, when you don't go to the store and you don't understand that eggs are $9 or $6 or $5, they used to be $1.50. And I remember when I was a kid, and I used to buy an ice cream cone. It was 15 cents, at Baskin Robbins, and now it's probably $15. It's crazy out there. But I did want to share a couple of good products that I think anybody that wants to be like you don't want to have the fat, but you want to have the protein, but you have lactose intolerance, but you want to have a bowl of cereal. Kind of cool. Dan, have you found any treasured foods you like to share with anybody?
I was looking at what my milk cost, but 64 fluid ounces is a half gallon. So that's a bit less than a half gallon.
Okay.
So the one I buy is $3.55 for a half gallon. So $3.55 for a bit more than that.
And the milk that you buy is going to be lactose free, correct?
Yeah, it is Friendly Farms lactose free whole milk from Aldi. That's the milk I've been
But you
getting.
don't know if it's probably not going to have as much protein, or does it have as much protein as any
Probably
regular
not. It has a lot more fat, I know that, but it probably doesn't have the protein.
Yeah,
but
because that's
the milk,
I didn't know.
the regular milk that Law gets is $2.79 for a gallon. So it's the lactose-free part that makes it cost a fortune.
Okay.
Regular milk isn't that expensive, but lactose-free milk is quite expensive.
Okay, good to know. And basically, I know there's coconut milk and there's oat milk and there's what all these different milks, but none of them have the protein content that I'm looking for because my compulsive lifting situation is not good. Yeah. So today is April 1st. I almost didn't get on with Dan just to basically screw with them, and then I thought Stephen Kassoon would throw a fit. Our fan out there and our stalking fan. We love you, Stephen.
Did you also remember that this is our April 2nd episode?
Okay,
and our
that's
April
true.
1st episode we recorded yesterday and went up this morning.
Okay, fair enough, Dan. So you know what? I don't use a calendar, folks. Okay, I basically on the on that calendar that's up in the sky, I just follow the North Star or something, and sometimes it guides me, and sometimes it recklessly invites me to places I shouldn't be. So never mind anything. But can I just talk about April 1st? Can I at least, since I didn't know it wasn't going to go up, Dan, you could still technically post it today, but you won't. So Dan, pretend it was yesterday, even though it's today. I can't talk about what's going on yesterday, but I can talk about it today for yesterday. And I posted today, but I think that's now yesterday. Yeah. Can you talk for just a moment about the pre-release Raichu card and a little bit about the lore of that card in the sense of, do you recall a little bit of the April 1st nonsense that was involved in the Poke Gym and whatever forums that were out there?
It was obviously in about 2006, Mike Martin had done the official reveal of the pre-release Raichu on Poke Gym, sharing details of Mike Boozer's copy. And it was when Mike Boozer was selling his, and Will Gore, I think his full name was buying it from Mike in 2008. All of the talk and everything around the sale was in March of 2008. And I think the actual sale happened a few days before April Fool's Day, but Pokepop decided to wait until April Fool's Day to post the story of a pre-release Raichu sale to get all of the talk going as to was it real or was it an April Fool's joke. Because I think every year on Poke Gym, they'd normally do something silly for April Fool's Day, as a lot of sites do. So he posted that on the morning of April Fool's Day, like really early in the morning, and then just kept people guessing up until midday. And then I think it was at like 12:01, because technically you're not supposed to fool people after midday. And it was at like 12:01 Eastern time. He then posted, "I can finally reveal that this is totally real and that the sale was happening."
And Dan, there's still people, that's so, it's always, crazy for me to think about it. There is this dichotomy today. We continue to refer to it by the old collectors or the older collectors and the newer folks. And we're going to have a bunch of newer folks that watch us. So talk a little bit about the card itself. I mean, this card itself, which I posted on my IG in the last 24 hours, and which we have a podcast on Dan's channel that I also referenced. It's really fascinating because we go through every facet of the provenance of the card, which today becomes so important because of so much that has been thought to be real and was not real. But in the transition of the hobby, when I was collecting in the beginning, this card was everything. This was, a mystic card, and no one believed it existed, but we knew it did. And now today, so many people don't even know about this card. Can you talk just about the 11 copies and how they came about and what's happened since then?
Yeah, so the 11 copies is not a definite number. So basically, it's a base set Raichu that has a pre-release stamp on it, the same pre-release stamp that would be on the pre-release Clefables from Jungle. The story is that a small number of Raichu were stamped by mistake when they were stamping up the Jungle Clefables for pre-release, and they were just kept and given to a few higher-up employees at Wizards of the Coast. And during the time when WotC still had Pokemon and ran tournaments, a lot of the WotC employees would talk about it a bit and show it off to some people in very small groups, kind of in private at the end of events. Some professors and stuff got to see it, but they would always publicly deny that it was a real thing. It was kind of a running joke between them of, I've heard that Mike Boozer would literally say to people, it doesn't exist, while showing it to someone. He'd have it open in his binder, but says, no, pre-release
Yeah,
Raichu
you're
is a
not
real
seeing.
thing.
You never saw what you just saw.
Sure, yeah. So the first documented case of it is from a guy called Edo. I said in our last video, he said in his GeoCities post, which was from 2000 at the Tropical Mega Battle, he said that he was shown it by Andrew Finch, and then someone in the comments of our last video said he clarified later that Andrew Finch was showing it to someone, and he overheard and he got to see it that way. It wasn't Andrew Finch coming directly to him. But either way, the year 2000, it was the first or the earliest surviving written down documentation that this card was known about. And then it was obviously talked about a little bit on forums and stuff after that, before Mike Boozer in 2006 agreed to officially talk about it on PokeGym and share some photos of his copy. Basically, the story of it over the years has been, any copy of it, it's all about provenance. Because of the fact that it's not a card where you can go, oh, can we verify the card? Because base set Raichu is a thing, it's a normal base Raichu, it's just the stamp. And stamps are certainly easier to fake than cards. So it always has been, you have to be able to trace it back to its original owner, basically. You have to be able to trace the sales history back to a WotC employee. Like, it's been guaranteed that there were pre-release stamped Raichus existing as early as 2000, really as early as 1999 when they were making the pre-release Clefable. So it's all been about making sure your copy can be traced back to that time period, because that's really the way that you would guarantee authenticity on a card like that. One big discussion people have always had around it is it real? And you get a lot of people saying it's not real, or people saying it's not a collectible, whatever. I guess for me, obviously, this was never an officially released card. We've talked the last couple of days about the difference between officially released cards. Like, I've said stuff like the sample set, the FPO set, all of those are not officially released cards, but they still have collectability, they still have value, they still have interest. The pre-release Raichu is in the same category as that, as it's not an officially released card. And it's maybe even closer to WotC merchandise or a WotC artifact, as opposed to being an actual card in terms of how you're viewing it. But it is obviously a card. It's a card with a stamp on it. So really, it's funny because the big debates around it and the people who will always yell about it and question it are people who have never owned it, and a lot of people who never will own it, because it's a lot of people who it's always been out of their price range. It's a lot of people who've either never wanted to own it, or they've wanted to own it and then couldn't, so decided they didn't want to own it. And really, the only people who I know who have like, yeah, fine, it's real, of course it's real, I can see that it came from this WotC employee, were you and Rusty. And you are the two people who now own them, who own the copies that we can still trace back. I'll say the two copies that you and Rusty have are obviously the only ones that are publicly known about, where they can be traced back to a WotC employee. There is a good chance that some former WotC employees, potentially still WotC employees, do still have these. I mean, there's a good chance Andrew Finch still has his copy. We don't know what he did with his copy. He might still have it. I would even say he probably does. I'm pretty sure Andrew Finch works at TPCI now, so there's a good chance he's just got it. Maybe he's saving it for retirement or something. But it's
Dan,
a card
Dan,
where,
you do. I just want you to clarify. You're
yeah,
completely and 100% speculating, though, correct?
yes,
You
I
do
would
not,
say
for our audience, you do not know that there are any others. You don't know 100% sure that there are any others out there.
no. I don't 100% know that there are any others out there. Obviously, the number that was created has been said anywhere from 6 to 11 over the years. That's what's been said is created. So if that number went out to WotC employees, I mean, I doubt any WotC employees trashed them or threw them away. I don't think any of them would do that, given how special it was being given out. But it's whether it lost provenance over the years. If someone maybe gave it away to someone, and then they maybe gave it to someone else, because of the nature of what it is, if you can't trace it back step by step to the original owner, it's effectively as though that copy doesn't exist anymore at all. And then, like I said, it's speculation on my part as to whether some former WotC employees still have them. My guess would be there'd be at least another couple, but obviously we would have to wait and find out in the future if they ever come out and publicly state it.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with you. It wouldn't surprise me if there's another couple. I have no knowledge of that whatsoever. I think it
Right.
is interesting to differentiate between cards like the sample sets and the FBOs, because although they were test prints and stuff, as you mentioned and articulated, these were not test prints. These, because of the way that I was able to acquire the second one, in that I don't know when it was. You probably know more than I do because you know from my story. 17, 18, 2020, whenever I actually got the second card,
Around that
it
time, yeah.
had come to the person, the WotC employer, the Nintendo employer, the Pokemon employer, I should say. It had come by verge of a post-it note on it that said, oops, here's a goof for you, to
Right.
the person that was working at the firm. So one would imagine that that's probably how they all got them. Anybody that would have got one or whatever was out there, oops, here's a gaffe, a mistake. And so then, of course, the story goes, and you can watch the video that, many years later when they were sharing Pokemon cards in a binder, it's like one of the people that knew what it was said, "Oh my goodness, do you realize what you have there?" So,
Yeah.
so whether or not you would call this a mistake, an error, we could categorize so many different, ideas behind sample sets, test print sheets, error cards. But it's not just the provenance. I do want to clarify as well, and we will cover this in future videos. I keep referring to it, but there's so much controversy right now over grading card companies and whether or not they're doing their jobs and authenticating things efficiently enough, comprehensively enough, etc. And with the playtest cards from Japan recently, CGC's got themselves in quite a quagmire by actually authenticating cards that ended up being printed in 2024. But as Dan has alluded to, I bought these cards so many years ago, and there's not like there's hundreds of these cards out there, much less thousands or anything else. So far to date, there's literally been 2 cards of this nature, of this card, that have surfaced, each with specific provenance, each which has gone to be authenticated, each which had all of the components of printing and the stamps, both the cards and the stamps, compared to cards from that era at the same time, and were authenticated. So I've never worried about them. I've always known they were legitimate. I don't have any interest in owning things in my collection that aren't, unless I specifically bought them. I have a beautiful Charizard base set first edition card that was a fan art type of card that was meant to be beautiful and not meant to be authentic. So other than those rare exceptions, I know what I have, and I'm proud of it to be in the collection. But Dan's right. What people choose to collect and people's criticism coming down to, ultimately, so many folks are jealous and of other people and what they have, not just me. And it's not a good way. It's not a good look when you're commenting on others out of jealousy and just automatically challenging everything they put out there. It's not a good look at anything in the hobby, scalpers and everything else. It's the same thing. I don't criticize other people's collections. I'm happy for what they want to collect and make them happy. And I sure wish that we as collectors could more of embrace the differences of our collections than actually criticize them if they don't if they're different or more majestic in their minds than ours.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, very few people talk about Edo's tournament report that he saw one at the Tropical Mega Battle in the year 2000 in a report that was written in the year 2000, because a big story that has been made up by people who don't want this card to be real. A lot of people say that this was WotC employees. One, they said they did this. They said they did this deliberately to sell to collectors. Which there's two versions of that story that goes around. One is that they stamped them in 1999, and then no one sold them for 10 years, which feels a bit weird. But one, if they did that, you're still saying that that was a card that was officially stamped in 1999. Even, like, literally, even if they came out to... And genuinely, I'll say this. If Mike Boozer came out tomorrow and said, actually, I would like to finally admit it, we did it on purpose, we made the pre-release Raichu on purpose, we gave it to some of our staff members, that should make it more valuable. Because then it's an officially made card, only distributed to WotC employees. If you look at basically any other card game, some of the highest value cards in all of gaming are cards that are only made for the creators of games, right? That's just the way it is. The other version of the story that people have is that Mike Boozer created this story in 2006 for PokeGym. People like to spread that around. Obviously, because of Edo's tournament report, that's categorically false. What we know for 100% fact is that pre-release stamped copies of the Raichu have existed since at least 2000. We know that. And once you know that, I'm kind of going over what I said now the last time we did this, but once you know that, once you've established it as an absolute fact that WotC employees owned these as early as the year 2000, you then have to just decide, is that a card I would still want in my collection? If it is, can I trace a copy back to the year 2000? And that's all there is to it. People can shout and throw their conspiracy theories or throw their toys out the pram and say that, oh, WotC employees made these to make money off of. But once you know that they're real as in existed back in the day, owned by WotC employees, then you just go from there, and any other argument is invalid. I mean, if we're talking about cards that have if you're talking about cards where copies have come out from the Pokemon Company or from WotC, then you eliminate so many copies of so many different things. I mean, we know how many extra copies of the Illustrator have come out. We've talked about the Art Academy cards, where there's some of those. There's one where we know for a fact that the only copies on the open market are extra copies that came out from Pokemon. There are so many cards where copies that you get are copies that came from TPCI or came from WotC. And I think people just have a vendetta against the pre-release Raichu. There are certain people who really, really don't want it to be real, and they shout the loudest.
And again, categorization, right? When you talk, they're coming from a legal background. People don't really know that about me either. I have a law school degree, and everything in life. All of these different cases are based. They seem very similar, but they're based on actual different fact patterns. The fact pattern to every case is completely different when you dive down into it. And so as Dan is sitting there and he's saying, well, okay, we've got these Art Academy cards, and they came out from WotC, or I don't know the names of the companies, guys, Pokemon, I don't care, wherever they came out from. They didn't really, because, well, I'm sorry, we don't know that they did. Like, it's different than the pre-release, which is different.
For the Kyogre.
Yeah, let me just finish this one thing.
For the Kyogre, we do know. We know for 100% fact on the Kyogre.
Okay, so you didn't
finish your point, but I can elaborate on that if you need me to. But
what I'm trying to say is that there's also the idea of things being stolen or coming out the back door versus actually coming out from an employee. So I didn't, I bought my Art Academy cards, my PSA 9 cards from Collector's Cash, a big dealer, who said this the person that made these cards, the three people that made these cards aren't selling them, but I have these 3 copies and they're graded. And I don't even know, would PSA grade them today? I don't know. Maybe because they're so few and far between, and they're not, and they didn't come as a actual release, and they didn't come from the owner. I don't know, but that's not the point. The point is, where did they come from inside the company? Did they come from somebody who stole them, somebody, a WotC employee who did something wrong? And is that different if you're actually stealing? Maybe that's stealing versus the pre-release Raichu, which is actually handed to somebody and owned by them, and then they chose to sell, as opposed to judges' plaque promos who were granted as an award and then they chose to sell or choose to sell. So all I'm saying, Dan, is when you have to be careful to say coming out of WotC or coming out of Pokemon, because is it stolen? Is it a gift? Sure. Is it legitimate? Is it an error, etc.? And one more thing, a lot of the stuff that Rusty has from the very beginning days, Rusty is the owner of TCA Gaming and the true OG of the hobby for all these years. So a lot of the stuff he has came out the back doors, and whether or not that was print wrapping or friends he had in the facilities that did the printing, extra stuff that was left over and not used, and how somehow that all got to him and still is being sold. So
sure. Yeah, I will say up until about 2019, from what I've been told about TPCI, again, this is me knowing people who work there and knowing people who know people who work there, a lot more of that extra stuff, even rarer stuff like Art Academy stuff, they were a lot more lax on if they had extras and someone said, I like those, can I have one? It was a lot more open for people to be saying, like, yeah, you can take them, whatever, just don't sell them while you work here. Nowadays, I believe it's much, much tighter because of the hugely increased values, since 2020 of this kind of stuff on the open market. They're a lot more tight on, can someone just take an extra copy of something? And I believe there's been a much bigger staff turnover over the last few years, which, if you go by their whole don't sell them while you work here, like, chat, then there's more people who can sell this stuff. So a lot of this stuff that gets sold, I believe, isn't stuff that was ever, given out in an official manner, but it's not something that was stolen. It was just we don't think a ton of this has value, just take it if you want it, kind of thing.
I don't know, and I don't presume to know, and I try not to speculate, but I certainly feel like, because of the scarcity of like that Art Academy Kyogre card, it wouldn't surprise me if it got to collector's cash as a stolen card. I don't feel like, since they were supposed to be 100 of them going to the owner, the illustrator, and all of a sudden there's one out there. Maybe there's 10 others. I've not seen them. I don't think there is, but I don't know. I wonder if, I speculate that something like that, which is a clean card, a brand new card, and not something that's like a miscut or an error, it feels like that. I don't know that, and I really shouldn't speculate because I just criticized you for the same thing.
Like I say, it definitely came from someone at TPCI. Whether it was a theft from TPCI or from the printing company, or whether it was one of these cards where someone just said, can I take it home? We know that the stuff Collector's Cash got came from someone there, because there was a full graded run in a row of, I believe, multiple copies of each Art Academy and an Ishihara GX were all just one clean block at PSA. So they must have all come from that person.
Wait, Dan, wait.
Yeah.
Could they have come from Collector's Cash? Could because I'm like, for example.
Well, no, they got two Collector's Cash.
Yes,
but Collector's Cash got them. Either Collector's Cash got them and graded them, or someone graded them and sold them to Collector's Cash. But either way, all of those came from the one person.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was something that was stolen, but because it included Ishihara GX as well, my thought would be it's someone within TPCI who was allowed to have access to these cards. Potentially it was someone who was actually given them as a, hey, you work really high up, take them kind of thing. Potentially it was someone who said, can I have these? And they said, yeah. But because of the fact that the winner of the Kyogre has been identified and has confirmed over the years that she still has her deck box with her 100 copies still sealed, we know that any Kyogres on the market are extra to that 100. There's at least, I think, 3 or 4. Yours isn't the only one. There's at least another couple out there of the Kyogres. It's not just the one, but generally it's presumed that, probably they did a whole sheet printing, which would be 121 copies, gave out the 100, and there were 21 extras of each lying around. Because whenever they make anything super limited, they don't make exactly the right number, because you don't want to order 100, get them and go, oh, one's damaged. We now have to fire up a printing thing again to get one extra copy. You want to have some additional ones around. I've been told that for super limited stuff, so we're talking like champion stamped cards, trophy cards, generally the rule is 2 to 3 times as many as they actually need. So when they're getting, the Champions Festival, the Paradise Resort, the amount that are stamped with the champion stamp is about 2 to 3 times as many as they're actually going to give out, because they want to make sure they have more than enough for if a couple show up damaged or anything like that. So that's why there is just a ton of extra stuff around. As I said, recent years, it's a lot more under lock and key. It's a lot more taking ownership of, we need to know where our extra copies of these are. We need to make sure this stuff isn't just disappearing anymore. Because, back in the day even when those art academies first came out and they were selling, we got the majority of them for under $100 or around $100. For someone who's working at TPCI, I mean, one, TPCI don't really care if an extra $100 card makes it onto the market. It's not making big waves. And also, for an employee, $100 isn't worth sabotaging their job for if it's not something they've been told they can have. But now when you're talking about, like, that Kyogre is a $10,000 card. If you have a situation like that again, they can't just be willy-nilly handing out $10,000 cards to anyone who says, I'd quite like to have that,
Yeah, I always go by, so one of the tenets that I've lived by, me, I live by two, which one is accountability. Take accountability for your actions, no matter I was talking about this the other day. If I was upset at you for not knowing some information or thinking you knew some information about Worlds Passes, it's not your fault, it's my fault, because at the end of the day, it's up to me in any situation to make things right or to figure out what I'm doing. And transparency is the other one. And transparency, that comes out to be, just telling it like it is. And so there's definitely cards that I own, that they might have a shady kind of, where do they get there, like a Kyogre. In the pursuit of things, I haven't really cared, because I'm not judging. I'm just judging. I was fortunate enough to happen to see it and go to Collector's Cash and say, will you sell it to me? And got very blessed by doing that, since now they're very few and far between. Yeah. And sometimes you can't, at that point, the prices are reasonable enough. Do I think a $50,000 plus Doug Ferguson card, the production manager card I mentioned the other day, the artist proof or the test print or whatever Dan wants to call it, artist proof, again, questionable from the standpoint that probably was never supposed to be out there. Don't know if the artist was limited or not. It's his card. He could do whatever he wants, but Pokemon might have not allowed that. I don't know, nor do I care. It was out at a public auction. I bought it. So I think there's, situations that you can question, but what I know about the cards is I know they're legitimate cards. These are nothing I own is counterfeit or was not printed in 2024. And we're going to talk more about that in a future video. But I'm going to mention one other category of cards, which are maybe a couple of the ones, and then we'll wrap this up, that I don't have. I do not have in the collection. I'm going to let Dan talk about this. And it's very frustrating. I try to justify one, because I'm not going to pay the money if one comes out there. And the other thing, so then I start justifying by saying, well, gosh, they were never supposed to be out there. So they weren't even supposed to be released in any way. So is this different? So here's my category now, Dan. Cards from, should I say Pokemon? I'm going to say Pokemon. Cards from Pokemon that were never supposed to go out there. So you're like the Kyogre. Well, it did get out there because it went to the illustrator. So it was supposed to be out there. But the cards I'm referring to are the pre-release stamped set cards from a series of sets that Dan's going to tell you about right now.
The staff ones?
The staff ones. Go ahead, Dan. Talk.
Yeah, so it was during Sword and Shield era. When COVID shut down everything, there were no tournaments anymore. The first set that came out, or the first couple of sets actually after tournament shut down, were fine. It was Darkness Ablaze, fine. They still sent the staff stuff out to stores, and they said to stores, hey, just give these to whoever your judges would normally be. Just give them the staff promos. And it went fine. They handed them out. Then came Vivid Voltage, and that set had a staff Charizard in it. And TBCI sent them out to stores and said, please distribute these to your judges as you normally would. These are not for you. These are not for your store. These are for your judges. And a overwhelming number of stores said, no, we're going to sell these, which is theft. It's theft from the judges. If someone sends you something, if you're a store and you're sent something and said, you must give this to this person, and you instead sell it, you've stolen that from the person it was meant to go to. You know who you are, a lot of the stores out there, including one very, very big name store who I'm not going to mention, but who openly admitted to it on Verbank and has had no repercussions and should have done, along with a lot of other people that did. Anyway, because of that whole debacle, where judges were complaining and saying, hey, we didn't get our promos that we're supposed to get, they said, all right, fine, no more staff promos until events actually come back. So, get a couple of years down the line, and Silver Tempest, the last regular set of Sword and Shield, is the last set that as the first set back where they start sending out staff promos again to run pre-releases. So there's a 7-set block in the middle there initially where no staff promos are ever sent out. I'm trying to remember what they are off the top of my head. So it's Battle Styles, Evolving Skies, Chilling Rain, Fusion Strike, Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Lost Origin. That's the 7. Of those 7, 4 of them, Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Lost Origin, and Evolving Skies, after pre-release tournaments come back, some stores in Europe are sent copies. They're sent official copies. They're sent them with, here is a backlog, basically, for some of the events you missed. Give these out to pre-releases. So we're then left with 3 sets, Battle Styles, Chilling Rain, Fusion Strike, which have never had any sort of official release of these staff promos. So the other four sets, like I say, they're limited because they were only in Europe. You've got some of them. We still need to get you some more. But those 4 sets had some sort of legitimate release. We absolutely need to get you the rest of those sets because somewhere in the world had them. The other 3 sets, there are staff copies on the market. But from all the research I did, all the people I spoke to, they're stolen. There's some warehouse somewhere in Europe. Someone will have broken in because someone sold sets of all 7 of these sets before the stores in Europe got their copies of the other 4 and got them legitimately. So we know that these must have been stolen and sold. Some ended up in Australia, but the people in Australia confirmed that they bought them from a store in the UK. So it was somewhere in Europe that this theft happened. So there are 12 staff promos out there, of which there are no official releases. Little bit of a slight hiccup on that one is from Chilling Rain, one of the 4, the Cinderace. Somehow, a very small number of staff versions ended up in the regular build and battle kits, the sealed 40 card decks. For some reason, a very small number of those, like literally 3 or 4 in the UK, had staff versions sealed in them. So there are about 3 or 4 legitimate Cinderace, like legitimate as in not stolen, accidental released Cinderaces out there. But any other Cinderaces plus the rest of the Chilling Rains, the rest of the Fusion Strikes, and the rest of the Battle Styles are stolen in some way. Obviously, they're legitimately printed. They were legitimately stamped. It was just, they were never released. They were stolen from a warehouse somewhere, and that's how this small number of copies, we're talking, again, 3 or 4 copies of each maximum, are out there on the market.
So if you're watching, so obviously, guys, amazing information from my friend Dan Norton. It's as always, and when he's cataloging the 7 sets right off the top of his brain, and then he goes to the next 4 where they actually did something, the 3 where they didn't. I think that was all about showing you the nails and the nail polish matching the hair. I don't think that was actually, tied in any kind of fact based whatever. But he's amazing, and Dan, it's great education. If you're watching and you have any access to any of these 3 sets of cards, we're definitely looking for them. In fact, all of them, all 7, probably need some somewhere. You don't even have to go into all the details, Dan. But if anybody has those or can help us out find those, that would be wonderful because we're still looking to do that.
I like how you started this bit by saying, here's a set of cards, I don't know if they really count, I don't know if I actually need them. And then as soon as I said what they are, you went, yeah, I need those, someone come and sell me them right now.
I'm addicted.
You are.
I'm addicted. That's the whole point. There's some kind of continuity through these things. It's not just about cinnamon streusel cakes and some lactate-free milk, and whatever latest thing you let somebody put into your hair. There's more than that. It's a Pokemon card collecting podcast.
Let me say to people right now, because I do say this to a lot of people in a lot of groups, and I don't know why no one ever listens to me. Something like this, if we've put it out on one of these podcasts and you want to sell it to David, message me. I know which ones he needs. I have enough of his money to make these purchases. Come to me. Because if you go to David, all that will happen is David will screenshot your message and then send it to me. That's all that happens in these situations. Just message me and I'll deal with it, and then I'll tell David which ones he's got. Because I've already bought him some of those 4 sets that were officially released. So come to me directly, don't go to David, because it will just take longer.
So I'm going to wrap up now by saying this. What you just heard from Dan is you heard the behind the scenes, a little snippet of the behind the scenes working of our card acquisition mechanism. Okay. And so having said that, I'm going to say this. I've spent a lot of time over the last 24 hours, for whatever reason, stuff pops into my head, thinking about the concept of Patreon, of which over the course of time, I've not been a huge fan of, only because I don't, think sometimes people do it for all the wrong reasons. And then I started thinking about the concept of Netflix, where you get to watch a great movie. Oh, by the way, I should just say that. I was going to say that and totally forgot. Watched a great movie on Netflix last night, folks. If you get Netflix, watch Life List or The Life List. It's brand new. Tremendously interesting movie. You'll really like it and you'll thank me later. But anyways, Netflix, you pay a monthly fee, right? If we pay, let's call it $8 a month because we're cheap and we get the ads. But there's some reason you pay that. You pay that because the content on there, like the movie we watched, was very valuable, enjoyable, and we really had a good time watching it. And so for my friend Dan Norton, I'm going to ask you guys that are watching, I'm going to make my own personal plea. If you've got $1 or $2 and you'd like to help him out, do support his Patreon, because I didn't ever think about it from that standpoint. He's not a person that makes a lot of money. This is really his prime employment, and he spends a lot of time putting these together. And it's really impressive, and I'm thankful for it, for sharing all this with you guys. And every little bit does help. And so, if you need information, whatever, go to Dan, go to me, we'll try to get on Patreon and do it. But every little bit of a monthly type of thing, if you like what we're doing, would make a big difference. So thank you for listening and your kind consideration. I think it all helps, and I appreciate you guys following along with us.
And I will say, for Patreon, I don't make Patreon exclusive videos because, I'm making enough public content to not have to make more videos that I then hide. But I use my Patreon. My Patreon is basically a tip jar. If you enjoy it, if you enjoy what you're seeing publicly, throw me a couple bucks. I don't know. I do little write-ups occasionally on there. I talk a little bit about what videos are coming up, or show some behind-the-scenes stuff, or maybe mention why I made some decisions. Lately the posts have been a little bit short because I've been doing a video every day, so I haven't had that much to say. But that's all it is. It's just, if you enjoy this public stuff, you can support us that way. Yes, I'm never going to hide information videos on Patreon, only just because I think this information should be public. I think the more information that is hidden on Patreons or hidden in private Discord servers where people are, doing their buyouts and whatever, it just makes things worse for a lot of people, and it just helps people either scam other people or rip other people off. It helps them prey on people who don't know as much. So I always want to make sure that as much information is public as possible for everything. So that's why all my content is still going to be public, but you have an option to support if you enjoy it. But if not, if you don't have the money, then you're just watching these, recommending this stuff to your friend. That's always helpful too, just helping to grow the channel. There's always ways that people can help. You can share it on your Instagram feed or whatever.
For sure. Well, I took no topic today, Dan, turned it into something about food and services, and somehow we got another 45-minute video. So thank you for the time and effort. I'm going to close out. Dan, any other comments? I'm going to wave soon.
Nope, that is it. I got to go wait Laura up so she can go to Pokemon League. So I'll say goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.